band is this?
Everybody poops sometimes.
Give us the smolder.
Wake up, sweetness.
Your first time should be more than special.
I'm in, Savannah said. Good Lord, Gemma.
When a man and a woman, in this case, really, really love each other, what happens is they fuck.
Ooh, hello?
Oh, dang it, I lost my fish. This next word almost sounds like Quidditch. Quidditch milade to Diana Agosiagath an Fiedian. As much as I love fucking you, sweetness, we stared into each other's eyes whilst I moaned in ecstasy. Having consumed half of the bourbon, I keep saying bourbon. You know, every time I mess up on a word, Stunt Mama just shows up.
She had her seductive smile on her lips.
I said we couldn't have sex. I didn't say anything about everything else. Ew. Happy to help, biatch. You are the spark of light in the vastness of my night. His note, like a finality to a beautiful, breathtaking song.
Sell online and grow your business with...
Hello. How's it going? I'm glad it's, book time. You know what I mean? I'm glad we're here for that. I'm ready for it. It's been a long weekend. It's been a good weekend, but a long one nonetheless. Oh gosh, Stunt Mama's Mama, well done on getting first place. I am not in the least surprised, and I'm glad you're here. And Eternal Grace here. Hello, my dear. Mitchell's here as well. Hi, Mitchell. How are you? Comfy time? Absolutely. Comfy time and puzzle time. Glad it's been a good weekend. Yeah, it's not been too bad. There's your puzzle for tonight, by the way. Today I went to the Amana Colonies, which is not too far from where I live. They have a whole bunch of homemade everything. So I got some cream sodas. I got some homemade caramel popcorn, some more taffy, and the tea that I've been drinking comes from there, and I needed more, so I got some more of that too. It was good. There's one place within that little town that I haven't been that I really want to go, and that is they have their own meat store. They have their own beef and pork and all that stuff. Oh yeah, I would break my bank account in that store. Which is why I have not been. But yeah. Anyway, I hope you're all doing well. We're going to finish the book tonight. That's the plan. I can't believe it. The time has come. It's always bittersweet, and I say this every time, but it's really fun getting into a book and just enjoying the story and seeing how everything unfolds and learning the characters and imagining where you are as the story progresses. But all good things come to an end. And this book is coming to an end. We're on the last 5-6 chapters. So, Sea Dog, you look like Jeremy DeWitt. I don't know. Well, I don't think I know who that is. I'm going to have to look up who Jeremy... Is that a compliment? Is this a good thing? Because if it's not, just lie to me and say it is. And I'll feel better about myself. My throat is all froggy. I spent a lot of time outside today. It's freaking pollen kicking my butt. It is? Okay, cool. Oh, it's delicious. Nice cuppa. Okay, I'm gonna have to look this up because just bear with me, chat. Bear with me. Jeremy, do it. See if I add a mustache. Yeah, I can see a little bit of connection there. Yeah. Yeah, I can see a little bit. I have a feeling his bank account's nicer than mine. But it's not about that. He's an artist. Anyway, it's good to see you, Sea-Doc. Thank you for coming in. Right, so we're going to finish this book, which has been a great book. He's a big troublemaker, though. Well, how do you know I'm not? Impersonating police. Oh, dear. I'm not that much of a troublemaker. Okay. And then once we finish this book, we're going to switch to this book, which is one that I wrote. It's got my picture on the back for proof. I've never read this book on stream before. I'm a bit nervous about it. Not going to lie. But that book will start on Thursday. Okay? So, stay tuned for Thursday. All right. Well, I have no idea actually how many pages, because as I've mentioned before, there's no page numbers in this book. But we're going to read it anyway. You read out loud on stream? I do. I am a book reader. I take other people's books with their permission, of course. Other authors, I talk to them about their book. I make sure it's a good fit for stream. And then I read them just like you would at home. Just think of this as a live audiobook. Also, other than reading current authors that are living and breathing, it's kind of of course you're breathing if you're living. Anyway, other than reading current authors' work, I also do not read ahead. So the chapter that we're starting on tonight, which is chapter 30, I have no idea what this chapter is about. So your first time hearing it is also my first time hearing it, which makes everybody's reactions authentic. So yeah, that's kind of the thing. That's my shtick. I just read Catcher and the Rye. Ah, nice. No reading head, dang. Yeah, it can be interesting sometimes, especially when we switch from one book to another and I have no idea how the author writes and I have to kind of get into the groove of their writing. It can be an adjustment, but it's all good though. Mama House Gaming. Hi, my dear. How are you? It was good to catch you earlier. Wasn't for very long, unfortunately, but I was glad to see you nonetheless. So let's sit by the fireplace, shall we? Let's have ourselves a cozy little read. As I said, we're gonna finish the book tonight. That is the goal. We may go past our normal stop time, or we may not. I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens. exclamation point Orthea, just like in the book title, if you want to check out this book behind the scenes, and also check out other authors and see for yourself what our author's all about. You can't contain your excitement? Well, please try to stay calm. Please remain calm. All right, here we go. Looks like we're starting off with Fiona and Julian with their camp.
Daddy.
That's right. We're always calm over here. That is the goal. That is absolutely the goal. Okay. Where's Nikolaus? Fiona cornered Julian as soon as everyone dispersed. What Cleary do with him? What do you care? Julian stared at her. He's a Mordor. I thought you cared a little more than that. He helped you save me. Julian shook his head. I owe him nothing. All he did was show us which tent you were in that night. I'd have figured it out on my own sooner or later. Fiona swallowed. Hot, angry tears threatened. You don't think that's worth something? Do you think he left with us because he was a hostage? That he'd end up in some kind of shade prison? He wasn't ever one of them, even while he was with them. You act like I did nothing. I'm not saying that. Fiona rubbed her eyes. I wish you'd see what I'm trying to tell you. Julian was quiet for a moment. Cleary has him in the main building, but I doubt he'll set him free anytime soon. Well, that didn't work. Unless it's delayed really badly. Hello? Is this thing on? Oh, that's weird. I was logged in to sound alerts, and apparently it kicked me out. So that might have been why it didn't work. Okay, we'll see if it comes through. What could he possibly gain out of holding him there? Justice for all the shades who died at the hands of Mordors. Julian stepped closer, his hands moving with him. Their red eyes shifted from him to Fiona, and their ears perked. Think of Mulaney. I am thinking of her. I don't think she'd want someone punished for doing the right thing. You don't know what she'd want. Hell, you've been with us all of a few weeks. Now the tears spilled. If you won't bother with him, I'll do it. It's best to let Cleary handle things his own way. Julian set his jaw stubbornly, looking away. Fiona wondered for the first time if Shades Hollow was the right place for her. He should let the people have a say. That's not how it works. Fiona closed her eyes, silent for a moment. Roll. I'm trying to act surprised, but you told me you were coming. Hi, Roll. Thank you for the raid. You did say, I know. Roll was playing Fortnite for the first time, and then switched over to DBD. And I gotta tell you, she came in second place on her last match in Fortnite, and we were all very proud of her. Even though, for every game, all we heard was, what is that? Where is that? Who the fuck is that? What is this? the whole time. That's all we heard. But it was fantastic. Oh, and the occasional, I don't know what the fuck is going on. So yeah. It was great. Mal, A was Arrow. Awa. It's good to see you all. Oh gosh. Thank you for doing the check-in. We just started reading, actually. We're just getting into the book. So yeah. Thank you for the raid. I'm gonna get cozy. Fantastic. I finally can just be here. I'm happy. Well, I'm glad you're able to just chill. This is what this is all about. Just taking a breath. Normally, I would say we're taking a breath to get ready for the workday, but for us in the United States, tomorrow is a holiday. But for all you in the UK, no holiday. Sorry. Just another Monday. All right. You have to work tomorrow? Oh no. All right, well then for you, this is a moment to relax. Tomorrow is my sister's birthday, so double whammy. Wow. That's cool. Well, happy birthday to your sister. Actually, I think I have something for that. Story. Hi. How you doing? That was a little birthday ditty just for your sister, okay? All right, come on in, everybody. Take a seat. Get comfortable. There's plenty of couches to go around. I'm going to keep reading because we are finishing this book tonight, no matter what it takes. That is the goal. And actually, I should have done this earlier. I need to turn on slow mode because I will miss everything. Oh wait, it's already on. Never mind. Just kidding. Comfy time again? Yes. All right, where were we? All right, yeah, so Fiona was saying, I'll talk to Cleary. There has to be something we can do, is what she just said. What was that? Oh. That scared me. FPS, thank you for the follow. And I'm just going to keep reading because we're ignoring, don't listen to Story, by the way. Just ignore her. All right. We're barely a page into the book, folks. All right, come on, calm down. Let's see. Be my guest. He's not the easiest to influence, though. Be prepared for conversation to not go as you planned. Either way, we need to go pack. Fiona ignored him and turned to find Cleary. He remained planted on the porch, reminding her of a king on his throne. The thought soured her stomach. She marched over and up the steps until she stood toe-to-toe with him. He turned his attention to her, his face somber. You have something to say, Fiona? I do. I want to know what you plan to do with Nikolaos. Cleary waved a dismissive hand. He will be dealt with soon enough. Don't worry about it. I am worried. That's why I'm here. Cleary's expression was like he found himself in conversation with a toddler. My dear, he's a Mordor. One, I might add, who took part in the kidnapping of your beloved Melanie. You don't know that. I don't remember seeing him. I don't imagine you would, with being knocked out cold. Cleary smiled. Fiona's anger grew. I can't believe you wouldn't at least give him a chance. He saved my life. I believe Julian has that honor. Brandon and Dari too. Ah, Eternal, thank you. And thank you for the lyric. We'll add squats to the counter. Just don't get carried away. I don't really have an ass, and squats is not gonna, make it any better. Mad Locust, I'm out of tea, so I'll have to a latte at 2 a.m. That is not a good idea. I mean, you do you. I'm just mentioning it. That's my 2 cents, okay? Fiona twisted her hands into fists, and the wind picked up. He helped. Fiona, let him go. Fiona watched the wind ruffle through the old man's hair, combing through with invisible fingers. Now, I'm afraid that's not possible. Now. The wind burst into the doorway of the building, slamming the wooden door against the inside wall. Cleary jumped, startled. No. Young lady, you stop that now. Bring me Nikolaos. I'll be in charge of him. Fiona raised her chin defiantly. Cleary studied her for a moment. Then his grin returned. Fine. But if he pulls anything, it's you who takes the blame. He turned and muttered to a shade behind him, and the man disappeared inside the building. Cleary returned his steely gaze to Fiona. He will join you when the portal is open. I hope you know what you're doing. And that's the end of the chapter. Would you believe it? All right, what'd I miss? So much. Okay, we got the 2 a.m. I'm gonna be like Oprah on Friday. You get a sub? No. Sexy priest time? I don't know. Might not be. It's could be very bad, actually. In fact, I've heard that 9 out of 10, not so great. And I'm just stating the facts. You can't argue with statistics. You could be the one. Oh, aren't you kind? Aren't you kind to this old man? Gosh. I spent so much time outside today. The pollen count in our area is ridiculous. And it's definitely messing with my throat. Which, as someone that narrates books and does voice acting, it's not helpful. Not helpful at all. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. F pollen. Psh. I don't need that noise. All right. Chapter 31. Here we go. The view from Iron Mountain was magnificent. Ivar watched his hot breath roll in white swirls out of his mouth, then focused on the mountain before them. They'd long left Wickard Forest behind them, and now made impressive progress through the snowdrifts. Melanie's skin now hinted blue as the cold sank into her flesh. As long as she was alive, Ivar didn't care if she was slightly frozen. He left her over the donkey and ordered a single fur skin thrown over her. The vial at his waist kept a steady heat that warmed him. Alina had gone from irritable to friendly since she told her story, pleased at his response, and his confidence in her loyalty grew. I'm all done with my spring allergies, don't have to worry now until the harvest. Well, aren't you lucky? I've never had allergy issues quite like I have until like last year and this year. It's been ridiculous. Thank you for the hydrate, by the way.
I'm lurking now.
And thank you for the lurk. Watch me wake up tomorrow wanting to die because of said allergies. Death could not come soon enough. Thank you. Aldo spoke so low only Ivar heard. He glanced at his friend questioningly. For confiding in me, that is. Ivar nodded. Not all secrets can be held by one person. This way, if something happens to me, you will see the plan through. There was silence between them, an uncomfortable one. He narrowed his eyes. You will do that, right? Aldo took his time answering, mulling the question over as if he struggled with the answer. Yes. All was going according to plan, which made Ivar more than a little suspicious, but the truth was if they got Alina in her new body, she'd take care of them if trouble happened to find its way to Old Grange. Excuse me. The Shades are coming. They may reach us before we get there. Alina's vial cooled almost imperceptibly. There's a word I don't get to say very often. Ivar picked up the pace. Then we have a break in the story because we're switching back to Julian and Fiona, who are the good guys and gals, if you will. Julian showed Fiona his house, one of the shacks on the outskirts of town where all the bachelors lived. It was small and undecorated, but clean. Julian set about preparing a travel sack for his horse with dried meat and a few assorted daggers, saying nothing. Fiona explored. Her curiosity piqued about a young man she realized she still didn't know very well. She stepped into the only bedroom and surveyed his bed, wash basin, and small order of belongings. Not much to see in here. Julian appeared behind her in the doorway, his expression tight. You ready? A sack of items sagged in the far corner on the floor, nearly concealed under a quilt. Julian caught the questioning look on her face and left the room, trailing a response behind him. Nothing to see, really. Come on. What is that? She asked, following him. Nothing but memories. You'd be bored. I don't think she'd be bored. He shoved the rest of his pile into the sack and pulled it shut. Sorry if I pried. You did. Testy. Fiona said no more as Julian led the way out of the house and down the lane to the square. The Shades were already assembling. They were much faster than she'd expected. The sight was sobering throughout the crowd. There were affinities of various shapes, sizes, and species, most which she grew up thinking were nothing but Irish legend. If only Aaron could see this. She left Julian's side and went to stand by Brennan and Derry, who remained on the edges of the group, chatting, as Julian stepped up the porch and stood to view the shades. Fiona knew she shouldn't be nosy, but she couldn't resist. Brandon, what's the sack of memories Julian has in his room? Brandon's smile disappeared. I don't think that's my business to be talking about, he said. Really? That's all I get? Look, Julian is like a brother to me. If he wants you to know anything about him, that's for him to decide, not me. Fiona knew the door was shut on the subject and let it drop. She turned to watch Julian spread his arms out. Everyone grew silent. Cleary was nowhere in sight. We must make haste. Bella has agreed to port us to Old Grange, but she can only do it a few at a time. Everyone, make sure you've dismissed your affinities. Everyone murmured, and the variety of animals and creatures began to disappear one by one. The crowd grew smaller. Fiona tried to hide her surprise. There were fewer of them than she thought. Would they have the numbers to take on the Mordor army and the power of Alina? Why can't the affinities be with us? She kept her voice low as she addressed Brennan. The portal magic doesn't agree with them. It can make them sick or even kill them. Why? The affinities are magic, and the portal overloads them. They can only take so much before they break apart. Fiona glanced around. Where's Nikolaus? As if on cue, the door to Cleary's headquarters creaked open, and the old man stepped out, followed by Nikolaus. Fiona's jaw dropped at his dirt-smudged, ripped clothing. Bruises and cuts decorated his face and arms, and one eye was swollen. Cleary grabbed his arm and pulled him down the steps. Aw, Rio. Let me make sure I don't lose my spot. Hi, Rio. How was Baldur's Gate? Thank you so much for the raid. How have you been? Are you doing okay? Been a little worried about you, to be honest. Not gonna lie. You've been on my mind a lot lately. You always go through a lot, but yet you give so much. I did change my name. I am rebranded. I am now the Bookfather. Book Daddy was already taken, so. BG3 was fantastic. I got in some trouble. Oh dear. Well, I really appreciate you coming over here and bringing your folks with you to see me. Seriously. And I know you've got stuff to do. I'm not gonna try and tie you up with 50 questions. It's been a struggle. Yeah, I know. I do try and keep tabs on your posts when you're keeping us all updated. You could say I'm watching in the background, so to speak. Picking through the shadows. For some reason, Shia LaBeouf just came into my head. But anyway, thank you for the raid. I hope you had a good stream, and I hope you're having a good weekend, regardless of everything that's going on. If you need to go get some Nums and fill up your belly, definitely please do so. But otherwise, relax, and I'll read you a story. We're finishing the book tonight, and then, Rio, by the way, on Thursday, we're going to start a new book that I wrote, which I'm nervous about. But it'll be fine.
I'm stronger. I'm smarter. I'm better. I am better.
I've been keeping your fam in my thoughts too. I hope everything's going okay. So far, so good. June 4th is the big day, surgery day. So we'll see how it goes after that. But I appreciate it. Your book? Yours. Yours. Yeah, I'm gonna read one of mine. And then I've got 2-3 more in the line waiting to go after that. So it's gonna be fun. Got a lot of stuff to read. Speaking of, we're partway into chapter 31 right now. So thank you again. And we'll keep reading. He's your charge. What did you do to him? Fiona ran to Nicolaus's side and lifted his face gently. He stared into her eyes, his expression defeated. He can't go in this condition. We had to make sure we had all the possible information on the Mordors. Cleary leveled a stern gaze at her. You should be thankful we took such measures on your behalf. So they basically beat the guy to a pulp to get information. I believe they call that torture. Yeah. That's what comes to mind. Fiona glared at him. Did you learn anything useful? Not really. He needs medical attention and rest. He can't go like this. Cleary shook his head. You said you wanted him. It's settled. What happens to him is on you. His gaze shifted to Nicolaus. And him. Julian exited the porch to where horses lined up waiting. He mounted his and motioned for Brannon and Darry and Fiona to join him. As they walked, Darry nudged Fiona in the ribs. I hope you know how to ride with a passenger, he whispered, then cast a wary eye at Nicolaus. Why? That one's yours. He pointed to a jet black gelding next to Julian. And Mordor boys ride with you. He shot a hard glare at Cleary's receding back. Fiona swallowed. She'd grown up riding her dad's horse, but that was an old farm horse with nothing better to do when it wasn't helping her dad with chores. This looked like a young, freshly broken steed. As if reading her thoughts, the horse shifted his head to stare at her. She glanced at Darry, who wore an idiotic grin. It's fine. Then you don't need help getting up there, right? Fiona wanted to knock the grin right off his face. No. Leave her alone. Julian's voice was laced with irritation. You know, the relationship between Julian and Fiona is so interesting. Just like either make out already or don't, you know? Just get it over with. Fiona didn't look at him or at Darry, who walked away without another word. She stood by her horse's head and grasped the bridle. He snorted at her touch, and she fought the urge to jerk away. He was much bigger than her dad's horse, tall and broad, with feathered hair around his ankles, so thick it looked like he wore skirts on each leg. Muscles shifted in his chest as he adjusted his stance. This was no ordinary farm horse. You sure you don't need help? Julian kept his voice down. Fiona sheepishly, I'm doing well with words tonight, by the way, sheepishly peeked at him under her horse's jaw and nodded. Without another word, he dismounted and came around to lift her up by her waist. She shivered as his hands touched her waist, not daring to see if he noticed, and kicking herself for the response. She threw a leg over the horse and pulled herself into position. Nicolaus pulled himself up behind her, smelling like sweat and blood and breathing heavily. Sorry, he whispered in her ear. Julian shook his head, left Fiona to situate herself, and returned to his horse. He made mounting look easy, and she glowered at him as he took the reins in his hands and looked around. Bella! A woman with bright blonde hair stepped out of the crowd. Her hood pushed her tousled hair back against her neck, and her jaw clenched. She shot a dark glance at Julian as she passed him, walking to a small circle and waving her hands in the air. When she pushed her hands forward together, a loud crackle filled the air and lightning struck the ground. A watery oval appeared. Hurry! I have to hold it open, she called. Julian turned his horse and centered through the oval, disappearing from view. Fiona urged her horse forward and followed, determined to stay with him. As they passed through the portal, the fluid surrounding the opening left a sticky sensation on her skin, but when the horse stopped on the other side, she was clean. Move! A gruff voice bellowed from behind her. Her horse skittered to the side, and Nikolaus clamped down his grip as Brannon burst through the opening, narrowly missing her. Keep going! Fiona ducked like a scolded child as she turned her horse to trot over to Julian. She expected him to grin, but instead, he kept his eyes on the portal until he'd seen all of the group come through. The portal made a wet sucking sound and imploded in on itself and vanished. Julian turned his horse to face the mountains sprawled before them. Let's go. The ground shook as the shades rode forward and sped towards Old Grange and Mulaney. Oh boy. That's the end of chapter 31. There's definitely going to be a fight. I mean, it would be weird for this, for everything that's happened, for them to not meet up with the Mordors and have some sort of battle. It'd be kind of anticlimactic at that point. I'm telling you, if any of you need a hot cup of tea made, just come over. I'll make you a delicious brew. Absolutely delicious. Fantastico. And I also strongly recommend that you get a metal cup and then a cup warmer so that you can sip on it and make it last all night. I'm buying flight tickets right now. Come on, let's go. Please do. Is everybody doing okay? Are some of you asleep? I mean, it's very possible. It's happened. People do fall asleep. All good? Well, I'm not surprised you're all good. Aren't you drinking like 3 triple shots or something? Doing good? Still awake? No, I'm not asleep? Okay. Raised, what is your Discord name? Because I tried to find you and I couldn't. Unless it's the same thing. But I'm just not seeing it because of, you know how when you're streaming, Discord gets all truncated username wise. It is raised? Okay. Okay, I think I got you. Cool. Thank you. I'm just keeping count of people that are here from the Hype Mind so I can make sure I properly thank you. All right. Chapter 32. Here we go. After I popped my neck, that felt good. By the way, if anyone here that's new or curious about this thing above my head. That is a community puzzle. Exclamation point puzzle will get you a link so that you can join any and everyone that's in there to help do the puzzle. So if you feel like doing a community-based game while you listen, if you're not doing anything else, you are more than welcome. I will preface, it's not quite ready for mobile yet. I think they're working on it, but best done on a laptop or something like that. Anyway, chapter 32. They were close. Ivar could feel the power of Old Grange already. The air was a mist of rain and magic swirling around the army, and the droplets made his skin tingle. Alina warmed the vial, as usual, keeping him from shivering in the intense cold. They needed to hurry. The winter solstice was drawing near, and they were running out of time. The doorway would only be open for an hour. Plenty of time for Alina to complete her mission if they got there soon enough. Don't worry. I'm not. I can sense your feelings, remember? It doesn't mean you should. Despite the banter, he caught himself smiling. He'd be able to hold her soon, to kiss her, to stand by her. By tomorrow morning, when the sun completely illuminated the old doorway to Old Grange, he'd have his sorceress in hand. He placed a hand on the vial, letting the heat permeate his fingers and warm his skin. Aldo cleared his throat, drawing Ivar's attention away from the sorceress. We're nearly there, but we need to make camp soon. We'll stop at Old Grange. The men should rest soon. They will. Ivar's shout echoed off the mountainous walls surrounding them. Everyone paused to look at their leader. He avoided their gazes, cursing under his breath for the lack of control. He was focusing too much on this woman and not enough on maintaining the fear and respect of his men. Aldo watched him wordlessly, waiting. We'll make camp when the sun reaches the tops of the trees. Ivar spoke calmly now. He scanned the horizon, gauging their progress. That will be sufficient for tomorrow's undertaking. Yes, sir. Aldo seemed satisfied. He began the march again, and the army followed. Ivar stood for a moment before following, aware that he needed to keep himself in check. It wouldn't do to have an uprising on his hands. He fell in line with the third wave and made his way back to the front line. Old Grange rested just over the next stretch of mountains. It'd all be finished soon. Another break in the story. Looks like we're back to Fiona, Julian, the Shades, the magical peeps that are trying to free Mulaney, who is one of their people. The Shades rode close together, eyes focused and brown hoods flapping behind their heads. The biting cold of the mountains tore through the fabric of their capes, reaching the bone. Fiona hunched close to her horse, her thighs protesting the grip she maintained on the saddle. She had no interest in falling off and giving Julian more to laugh at. Nikolaus rested his head on her back, his stomach pressed against her. Another person she didn't want to fall. She tried to glance at him over her shoulder, but only caught white hair whipping in the wind. Fiona wondered again if they had the numbers to take on the Mordor army. She'd seen how fearsome the men were, how much they enjoyed the very act of battle. They lived for it. Or she just wanted to save Mulaney and survive. Would these shades be enough? A whistle sounded in the air, high notes that pricked the horse's ears and pulled Fiona out of her thoughts. Everyone pulled their horses to a halt and gathered in a circle with Julian and Fiona at the front. He cast a furtive glance at her and stretched up in his saddle to see out in front of them. What was that? Fiona curled her frozen fingers around the reins. Scouts. As if to mark his words, 3 figures appeared in the distance, driving their horses at full speed. Though it felt like minutes, they flew across the grass and spewed dirt and grass into the air as they slid to a stop. The army isn't far. The middle rider was young, maybe Dax's age. Fiona gaped at him. The shades sure dipped into their resources. He caught her eye. You have a problem? She mutely shook her head. Julian ignored the exchange. How long before we reach them? A day, if we keep up the pace. Less, if we push it. The boy scanned the group, puffs of steam rolling from his every breath in the cold air. I'd say keep the pace. You don't want to burn out with these brutes. There are plenty of them. Julian nodded. Any sign of the others? No. Keep looking. The boy nodded and wheeled his horse around, thundering away with the other 2. Fiona leaned toward Julian, Nicolaus moving with her. Who are they looking for? Julian's jaw clenched. Dax. An ebony-skinned woman trotted her horse up to Julian and reached into her saddlebag, producing a palm-sized brown piece of jerky. He accepted it and inclined his head toward the rest of the shades. She tossed a piece at Fiona, who grabbed it, and a second piece handed to Nicolaus. The woman threw chunks of jerky to the rest of their group, everyone pausing to eat. You know, I do like a good piece of jerky. Thanks, Dakara. Julian finished his quickly and waited for the others. The jerky was perfect, moist and flavorful. Fiona guessed it was deer jerky, but she wasn't sure. Yet, if the animals were the same here as in her world, maybe they appeared the same but went by different names. The thought was a dark reminder that she still didn't know the world she found herself in. There were still so many things to learn and understand. As she licked her fingers clean, Fiona felt a swirl in her stomach. She rubbed it, hoping the meat wasn't disagreeing with her. The sensation turned into a sharp pain, stabbing her like needles. She flinched, jerking the reins, and her horse threw its head into the air and whined. Fiona! She barely heard Julian's call as her vision darkened, and Nicolaus's weight disappeared behind her. She heard a thump. He must have fallen off. She tried to look around for him, but her eyes couldn't see. The reins slipped from him, wrong line. The reins slipped from her grasp as her horse sidestepped, and she felt herself sliding. She clawed at the horse's tough hide, trying to stay upright, but her fingers couldn't anchor in the animal's fur, and she knew she was falling. Powerless. She hit the rocky ground, and searing pain flew through her back and limbs. Running footsteps thundered around her, and she felt hands resituate her body. She tried to move, but nothing cooperated. What's wrong with her? Nicolaus' voice filled with concern. Is she dead? Shut up, Julian snapped. Oh, she needs Melanie, Dakara said. I'm betting she hasn't had tea in a long time. Only when we first found her, Julian said. I didn't think. Melanie knows how to make the tea. I'm not that far into my training. However, I think I can bring Fiona around a while longer. Fiona heard movement and tried to speak, but could only produce a guttural moan. Please work faster. I'm trying, Julian. This takes a few minutes to work. Julian didn't respond. Fiona worked her eyes open enough to see Dakara wrestling with a mortar and pestle, grinding something up. When it was to her satisfaction, she opened her water skin and poured straight into the mortar, then ground some more. It's ready. Julian lifted Fiona into a sit and held her close. You have to drink this, he said into her ear. The cool stone of the mortar pressed against her lips, and she opened them as best she could. A bitter mixture flooded her mouth, and she fought the urge to spit it out, swallowing as fast as she could.
We know it's more than a life policy.
Blessed commercials. Dakara poured too fast and Fiona coughed, spewing some of the liquid into the woman's face. Don't drown her. Brennan sounded far away, his voice an echo. I didn't plan on it. Dakara's voice held the same echo, as did all the sounds around her. The horses shifting, the riders talking in low, hushed tones. The effect grew until Fiona could no longer distinguish one sound from the next. She squeezed her eyes shut and pressed her hands over her ears. Oh, Dakara, the noise. In an instant, all fell silent. Fiona opened her eyes and gasped in surprise. A bubble surrounded her. Dakara and Julian. It flowed around them in constant motion, blocking noise from the outside world. She followed the flow up, across Brannon and Derry through the rest of the group, Julian's face peering at her from straight above, and then over to Dakara. Dakara looked as old as Melanie up close, lines crisscrossed at the corners of her eyes, telling of a woman who loved to laugh. She didn't smile as she leaned in to examine Fiona's face. Feeling better? Fiona nodded. At least she could move. A little. What was that about? Dakara exchanged a glance with Julian. She didn't tell her. Julian shook his head. Or wait, that was Dakara. She didn't tell her? Julian shook his head. You know you're a mirror in this world, right? Sort of. She didn't exactly give me the detailed version. When most people are mirrored, they're stillborn in their own world. You weren't. You passed through. She leaned closer. You're an unborn. What does that even mean? You were never formally born here, and so the world may reject you. The tea is magic. It helps keep you assimilated with nature so that it doesn't kill you. Fiona thought of the Leshy. Had it not protected her? Maybe it stalked her to kill her and simply waited for the tea to wear off. She shivered. How often must I drink it? Once a month. More at first. Dakara pressed a small black drawstring pouch into Fiona's hand. Guard this with your life, for it is your life. Make more when the time comes. She stood and the bubble vanished. Can you stand? Fiona nodded to Julian. He helped her up, holding her hand longer than necessary to steady her. Confusion washed over her. One minute he acted annoyed by her presence, and the next he was helping. She wished he'd pick one and stick with it. Then she'd know what to expect. It's just like I was saying earlier, they just need to make out and get it over with. Nikolaos stood unsteadily nearby, waiting, his brows furrowed in worry as he watched her approach him. She spoke before he could. I'm fine. That didn't look fine. He held out his hand and she released Julian's to take his. Julian opened his mouth as if to say something, then clamped it shut and walked away. Fiona tried to hide the shaking of her hands as she pulled herself onto the horse. Nikolaos' hands grabbed her waist and pushed upwards, allowing her to fling a leg over the horse's back. She slid herself forward to give him room to climb up behind her. I know you still feel weak, he murmured in her ear. She hoped he wouldn't say anything. Not that the Shades had any interest in him. He was only there because of her. And maybe there was a reason. She wrapped the reins around her hands, not trusting herself to hang on otherwise. Julian whistled, and the group began to turn and move down the gravelly path. The cold seemed to grow more bitter as they moved down the slope and further into the mountains. Why so few shades? Nicolaus spoke low so the others couldn't hear. I don't know. Fiona had to turn her head to speak, thankful her horse seemed focused on staying with the others. She wouldn't have to attempt to steer him, something she wasn't sure she could handle in her condition. I thought Mulaney was in a position of power. Yes, but not like Cleary. He probably had a hand in our numbers. Why wouldn't he want her back? Good question. A question that swirled relentlessly in Fiona's mind as her horse picked its way through the leafless shrubbery and thin sheets of snow. Cleary was a mystery indeed. And that is the end of our chapter, which is good timing because there's an ad that's about to start. So I'm gonna run that we can get it over with, and then we can keep reading. Well, I certainly have an idea of why Cleary doesn't want her back. We learned last time we read that Mulaney is the sister to Alina. Alina blames Mulaney for everything that happened, and therefore is basically trying to get her revenge. And Cleary probably knows this. Or no, Cleary does know this because Cleary was the one that banished Alina's affinity. So, yeah. Anyway. Regardless of my thoughts, Cleary is still kind of a uncharted character. But he's kind of supposed to be. I mean, he's the mystery guy. He's the head honcho. He's guarded. All right. For those of you that can hear me, I hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying the chill, the calm. We've switched from using pretzel rocks to a royalty-free YouTube thing. I can hear for now. I am old though. Oh, mama. All right, the ads are over. Welcome back. Willkommen. We only have 3 chapters left. Just not much. So I think we're doing okay. Do you like the background music? Good. Any summer plans with the kiddo? Yeah, he's got some camps to go to. Kind of sporadically throughout the summer. He's going to be hanging out with some friends here and there, of course. Our school has a an after-school program called Champions, which also thankfully runs in the summer. So he will have some days there as well. And of course, we'll try and, take a small trip here and there. Just depends on how surgery goes and recovery and all that stuff. So, but yeah, for now, we're just trying to keep it simple. Simple, but not boring. You know what I mean? It's a hard balance. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. But certainly things are lined up. That's for sure. It's all good stuff. Nature camps, some sports stuff. I think he's got. There's a math one that he's looking forward to, which he's pretty good at math. He picks it up really fast, so that's really cool. All right. We're on chapter 33. More power to him. Yeah, he's pretty good. So he's 8 years old, and we started talking about fractions this morning, or was it yesterday? Yesterday. He was asking which was bigger, a third or a half. So I was explaining it to him, and it seemed to click. So we'll see. Chapter 33. Ivar allowed the men to make camp well after nightfall. They'd made good progress, and Old Grange was not far. Just pull out the measuring cups. Yep, that's another way. We used cake as an example, because I like cake. They'd sleep a few hours and then ready the camp for the last small trek to their destination. Alina had made no indication of her presence for hours, no doubt resting for the energy she'd need in the morning. Ivar could hardly wait for the morning and wondered how he'd be able to sleep. Of course you did. Rabbit? Aldo appeared at his general's side, holding a stick full of juicy tender meat that sizzled in the night air. Ivar accepted the offer and nodded his thanks. Aldo watched him bite into his meal. Are you ready for this? Why wouldn't I be? Ivar spoke around his mouthful, juices running down his chin into his beard. Just asking. I'm ready. Aldo nodded, looking as if he wanted to say more. Speak up. Are you sure you know what you're doing? With this woman, I mean. What if she's not how you think she'll be? What if she is? I guess I don't mean to sound unwilling. I'd do anything you ask of me. I just want to make sure this is the right thing to do for us. Ivar turned. The only us in this is Elena and me. Aldo's face reddened. In case you didn't notice, you have an entire army of men here. Why are you questioning me? Ivar's tone stiffened. Anyone else and even I can read. I swear to God. Anyone else, and he'd have already killed them. See, why was that so hard? It's not hard. He dropped the empty stick in the grass and wiped his fingers slowly on the fur hide at his waist. I have a bad feeling about this. About her. The vial warmed, heating quickly to the point of scorching, and Ivar jumped. His nostrils flared. Do not question me. Silence fell among the men, and all eyes turned to the pair. Ivar clenched and unclenched his fists, waiting for a response, but Aldo simply stared at him, his face unreadable. Neither man blinked as they waited for the other to break the stillness. Aldo was the first to finally relax. I'm sorry. Ivar remained tensed, his eyes narrowed. He spoke so quietly he barely heard himself. Do not ever question me again, or your head will be on a spike. Understood? Aldo nodded, his eyes hard. Yes, sir. The vial cooled as Aldo walked away. You'll have to kill him. Ivar nodded. I know. A scout ran up. Sir, they're coming. Ivar smiled. And now there's a break in the story. So, just to kind of help connect all this, Aldo and Ivar are like BFFs for life. They are buddies until the end. Ivar's in charge. He's the general of their Mordor group. But Aldo is his right-hand man, his everything. And this sorceress that's talking inside his head just told him that he's gonna have to kill him. And apparently he was fine with that. Now, I don't know about you, but every movie or show or book that I've ever taken part of has always had the character that means well but doesn't end well. And that's Alina. So not gonna work out too well for him. Assuming she actually takes, her human form. I guess we'll find out. My heart just skipped a beat. I bumped my teacup trying to set it back, and I almost spilled it. That would have been terrible. Okay. Breaking the story, we're back to Fiona. The winds bit through Fiona's clothing and into her soul, her robe and hood useless against the elements in the mountains. She hunkered down and allowed her horse to pick his own way through the brush and rocks to keep up with Julian. Nikolaos rested his head on her shoulder, his chin tapping against her neck. She wondered if he'd live to see the outcome of the battle, as weak as he was. Her anger against Cleary grew. Why had he insisted on making Nikolaos accompany them? The Shades reached the top of a sharp incline after sunset and pulled to a stop as the scouts ascended the other side to meet them. The boy who led them dismounted, keeping one hand on the reins. His horse snatched at a stiff tolt of grass poking out of a cluster of stones. The Mordors made camp just outside Old Grange. They'll want to reach it at first light, so I don't imagine they'll stay in one spot for more than a few hours. We'd do best to camp here and follow their lead. Why don't we just attack now while their guard is down? Dakar leaned in eagerly. We could. Still here just cozy? No worries. I'm glad you're cozy. All snug as a bug in a rug. We could. Julian rubbed his chin thoughtfully. But have you ever thought someone in the dark? Yes? Then you know what a challenge that would be. It'd be bad enough to face a foe in the light, but in the dark, you may not see one coming. I still think we should. Julian closed his eyes for so long, Fiona wondered if he was thinking or praying. The only sounds around them were the nickering of the horses and whistling of the wind. She raised a hand and pushed against the air, willing the wind to give her some relief. To her surprise, it relented, and the wind stilled. Julian's eyes opened and leveled on her. Fiona, it's time you tried out your affinity again. Can you embody your ego and fly over the camp? Check their positioning. She might still be too weak, Dakara said. Send your hounds. Julian said nothing. Fiona nodded. I can try. I've never done it on command. She dismounted, legs trembling, and sat on the rock, pulling her knees close and concentrating on the ground. She envisioned the eagle in her mind's eye flying overhead. Nothing happened. Fiona tried several more times, but her affinity didn't respond. Her arms and legs shook with effort and fatigue until she fell off the rock. Julian caught her, pulling her close to steady her. "It's okay," he said. "We'll try it later." The Shades set up a small camp and ate cold jerky rather than set a fire the Mordors could see. Several took up a guard around the perimeter to warn of any scouts who might discover them. Julian helped Fiona lay under an outcropping of rocks that broke the rising wind. As he covered her up, she managed to smile. "Thanks. Don't mention it." "I'm serious." Julian leaned down inches above Fiona's face. She could see every worry line, every crease, every lock of his hair. Her stomach flipped. "Julian?" "Yes?" He paused. "Why are you nice one second and mean the next?" Julian sat back. "I don't know. One minute you irritate me and the next you pull me to you. You remind me of..." Fiona waited for him to continue, but he fell silent. "The bag in your house. It belongs to someone, doesn't it?" He nodded. Fiona sat up and scooted closer to him, pressing a frigid hand to his cheek. He didn't move away. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pried. You have a right to your feelings. We've all lost someone. And we choose to be strong or weak for it. You lost your fiancé. What did you choose?" Fiona swallowed hard at the mention of Jason. "I choose to keep moving." Nikolaos appeared near them, laying down a few feet away. In the dark, his bruises made him look like a dead man, and Fiona resisted the urge to reach out to him. He gazed at her sadly for a moment before resting his head on his arms and closing his eyes. Julian saw the glance and said nothing more. He laid down and pulled her close to him, covering them with the blanket. His body heat warmed her, and he snuggled up against him, wishing for all the world she could resist. He was being nice now, but what about tomorrow and the next day? Questions running through her mind, Fiona fell into the sleep of the wounded. Her affinity came. Warmth flowed through her, and she felt herself flip into the air, colliding with the eagle's body and becoming one with it. Together they soared through the air, passing old, crusty trees with no leaves and sharp, overhanging rocks. Her eyesight expanded, picking up tiny details she'd have missed with her human eyes. A frail mouse running for cover, a snowflake falling down a ravine, a mountain goat chewing its food and regarding her unafraid. I fell asleep. Good. That's good. She marveled at the eagle's capabilities. Even in the darkness, they prevailed. The Mordor's camp was not far, and not hard to spot in the black of night. It spread across a blanket of white snow like a black leech, the tents anchored into the ground like claws. Fiona shuddered at the sight, remembering her time with them as a prisoner. She wondered how Mulaney was faring, or if this was a vain fight and her mentor was already dead. She couldn't be. Fiona shook her head, and the eagle mimicked her movements. They needed her body desperately now that all the other options had escaped. They'd kept her alive and protected at all costs. Fiona couldn't be sure, but she had to believe. Fiona pulled out of her thoughts on another one hit her. There was no movement below, no men. The camp looked almost abandoned, save for a campfire directly in the center. The horses stood tethered to the side, but no one attended to them. Where was the Mordor army? Fear hit Fiona in the gut like an icicle, and her blood froze. The army wasn't there. And that is the end of chapter 33. I'm glad you fell asleep, Gray. That's a good thing. It means you needed it, and it means I did my job. At least with this book. Eventually we're going to get to a scary book, or at least it looks like it's going to be a scary book. I can't guarantee you'll fall asleep on that one, but we'll see. Well, the Mordor army is not at their camp. And I think we can all take a really easy guess as to where they're going, since their scouts know where the Shades are. Dum dum dum. But let's find out to be sure, shall we? We're on chapter 34, 2 chapters left in the entire book. Let's see what happens. Fiona snapped awake in the same position she'd fallen asleep in. Disoriented, she stared up at the black sky for a moment, listening to Julian's soft breaths next to her ear. Despite his body heat, she shivered. Something was wrong. Someone was coming. A twig snapped in the distance and she sat upright. Ivar. It was then that she remembered her flight with the eagle. The Mordor camp had been empty. They were hunting the Shades. She had to warn them. Julian! Fiona hissed, shaking his shoulders. Julian, get up now! He jerked awake and sat up. What is it? The Mordors are coming. How do you know? I flew over their camp. Fiona's eyes welled with tears. We've got to warn the others. Fiona, wait. Fiona had already scrambled to her feet and ran past Nikolaus's prone form, grabbing his arm as she went past. Mordors! The word got him to his feet and frantically rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He followed her as she ran around to rouse the others. Julian and Dakara took up station with several others at the front of the camp, weapons drawn and eyes on the mountain. The faint blue of the rising sun hinted in the east. Fiona ran to Julian's side when she woken the rest of the camp. Where are they? I don't know, but the camp was empty when I flew over it. They could be anywhere, Dakara muttered. The Shades waited for what seemed like an eternity. Fiona's heart pounded in her ears, none too eager to face Ivar and his army again. Her breath swirled before her like smoke, curling and wafting to the sky where the full moon shone on the camp, illuminating them. 2 figures stepped out of the darkness. Fiona squinted for a better look, then recognized them immediately and shuddered. Ivar and Aldo. They stood a few feet away, weapons drawn. Ivar grinned at them, but Aldo wore a scowl. Neither group said a word, but more Mordor stepped into view. The army slowly revealed itself, flanking Ivar on either side. The moon sank in the sky, and the sky brightened more. Ivar looked at the eastern horizon, and his grin vanished. He yelled a command, and the Mordors charged forward with a deep war cry that sank into Fiona's bones. Then, he and Aldo turned and mounted on horses, galloping away. Thunder filled the air as men advanced. Julian! Fiona stepped back. She had no weapon, no way in which to defend herself. Julian, they're coming. I see that. He tossed his dagger and drew his sword. Shades, call forth. The shades whistled, a mix of melodies nearly drowned out by the Mordors. All around them, affinities responded, appearing by their masters. Fiona jumped as Gabriel's hounds slid to a stop on either side of Julian, hackles raised and spittle dripping from their massive jaws. Dari advanced to Fiona's other side, followed by a fearsome Dobarchu, the otter dog of Irish lore. It pawed at the ground, anxious for the kill. A hand grabbed Fiona's arm and pulled her back. She twisted around, clawing and scratching to free herself. Stop, Brandon protested. Come with me. The sound of fighting began as he yanked her around a corner. I have to help. Fiona held up her dagger. Brandon shook his head. Julian made me swear to keep you safe. Julian! Fiona made one last attempt to run back to the front, but Brandon's grip remained firm. Take her. Brandon pushed her back and she fell into a strong, Suini arms. She fought, her hands slipping on fur and sweat. She flipped around and came face to face with beady emerald eyes, a narrowed face with bared teeth and thick, rigid horns that curled from its head to its shoulders. A puka. Sounds like a Pokemon. It lifted her effortlessly and hugged her close, running away from the brawl and down into a shallow ravine. Once there, it set her down, but never released her. She watched as the shades and Mordor's fought, mere shadows twisting and turning on each other. There was no way to tell who was winning. She tried to find Julian, but he was lost in the sea of bodies. Fear stabbed cold in her heart. Where was Nikolaos? Someone stumbled into their hiding place, and the puka whirled with a low growl, claws extended. Nikolaos. He staggered to her and fell to his knees, a line of blood running across his midsection. No. Fiona pulled away from the puka and wrapped her arms around him. His chest heaved as he gathered himself. How bad? I don't know. Fiona lifted his shirt, and her eyes widened at the gash that glistened in the light. The sun's rays peeked over the edge of the mountains, illuminating the wound. She reached down and ripped the hemmed edge of her skirt, wrapping it around his stomach and tying it securely in place. I hope that helps. We have to get past them, he gasped. They're busy. We have to get Mulaney. Fiona nodded and looked up at the puka. Take us there, please. The puka stood motionless, eyes hard. If you don't take us there, I'll go by myself. Fiona stepped closer to the beast. Brandon wouldn't like that, would he? Brandon's name caused the puka to shift uncertainly. It glanced at the fray, then turned back and nodded, scooping Nikolaos up in its arms and running east. Fiona looked up. Come to me, she whispered. On cue, she lifted into the air and joined with her eagle, flying so low and nearly grazed the top of the puka's head. It growled, but continued running, Nikolaos bouncing carelessly in its arms. They made it past the Mordor line without notice, skirting around to avoid any scouts. Fiona tried once more to locate Julian, but she couldn't catch faces quickly enough before they were passed. She turned her gaze to the east and to the camp where Mulaney was waiting. She could only hope they would be in time. The sun was rising. Break in the story. Switching over to Ivar and Aldo, which, if you remember, they called for the attack, but then they disappeared on their horses. Ivar and Aldo reached the camp as the first blades of sun swirled into view. They were running out of time. They hurried into Ivar's tent, and Aldo slung Mulaney over his shoulder, trying to block out the ice of her skin as her arm slid against his neck. If he didn't know better, he'd have thought she was dead. He lifted her onto his horse and jumped up behind her. The two Mordors kicked their horses into gear, galloping to Old Grange. A few minutes of riding brought the ancient tomb into view, the burial place of hundreds of ancient kings and sorcerers. It was built from stone, rising into a dome that defied the weight of any amount of snow. The doorway was still dark, the sun's rays drifting to the bottom. Soon, they would illuminate the door with light. Alina warmed in the vial, anxious. The horses slid to a stop in front of the door, and Ivar pushed Aldo to the side. "Let me get her." Aldo stepped back, scowling, and bowed. Ivar lifted Mulaney from the horse and set her on the first stone step leading into the tomb. He covered her with the blanket to warm her up, then removed the vial from his belt. He realized then how heavy the sorceress had been. He placed the vial beside Mulaney's head and stepped back. All they had to do now was wait for the sun to rise further. Already the doorway was halfway brightened. The vial turned from clear to yellow as Alina began to draw power from the light. "No." The voice was half human, half the scream of a bird of prey. Ivar whirled around to see an immense golden eagle descended on him and ducked just in time to avoid the slash of its sharp, black beak. It flew upwards and circled around, coming back for another pass. This time, he was ready. He batted at the bird with his hand and caught it in the wing. It spiraled into the ground and disappeared into a snowdrift. He ran to the spot where it landed to make sure it was dead. The hole was the size of his midsection, but the bird was gone. "Aldo?" His friend ran to his side. "What was that?" "An eagle. One of theirs. Did you see where it went?" Ivar spun around, desperately trying to locate the bird. "No." Aldo pointed to the doorway. "It's getting closer." The light edged up further on the doorway, its blades touching Mulaney's body. Her skin was still white, but she no longer looked dead. The vial turned bright, like a miniature sun. A roar startled both men, and they turned to see a giant goat creature jump high into the air and come down on Aldo's head, striking him with a great claw. When the man hit the ground, the puka stood over him with bared fangs and attacked again, slashing. Ivar didn't move to help his comrade. He ran to the doorway of the tomb, determined to guard Alina until the transformation was complete. Aldo's screams ceased, and the puka turned his attention to the general. Ivar knew he should run. These fearsome beasts were warriors too, the ancient kind. Then he saw the figures behind it, Fiona and Nikolaus. They had weapons drawn, Fiona with a dagger and Nikolaus with a sharply pointed stick so big he had to hold it with two hands. He chuckled. "I have to give you credit. You are stubborn. Nikolaus, I figured you were dead." "Huh. Not yet." Nikolaus looked terrible, covered in bruises and scratches. "Fiona saved me." "To what end?" Ivar bellowed. "To come here and die a traitorous death?" "To save my soul by doing the right thing." Nikolaus spat on the ground. Ivar gestured to the line of blood on the boy's shirt. "You can't fight me." "No," said a new voice. "But I can." Ivar turned and barely deflected the blow of a sword hilt, spinning away from his attacker with a surprising deftness. Fiona stepped forward, her eyes wide. "Julian." In the distance, a boom echoed across the mountain. that's the end of chapter 34, which means there's only one chapter left. Fiona, Nikolaus, Julian are facing Ivar.
Drink!
Cheers. I think it's safe to say that Aldo is no longer with the living. And it sounds like that Alina in the vial is almost free. I guess the question is, will she actually break out before it's destroyed or whatever they need to do? So good. Delicious. My gut tells me she's gonna transform into Mulaney. But then how do you set Mulaney free without killing her? I don't know. That's one thing that has struck me throughout the story. No one has talked about what the transition looks like and what they do if the transition actually occurs. They've only talked about it's going to happen. But from the, hero side of the story, the Shade side, no one has said, well, how do we handle it? What do we do? So I'm not sure. The only thing I am sure of is we're on the final pages. So, one more time, exclamation point Orthea, to learn more about our author, who is also a streamer, by the way. That violin chick. I think she's online right now, actually. Let me double check. Yes, she is. She's playing the violin. She was playing Hunt Showdown earlier, but she is definitely doing some violin playing at the moment. All right. Here we go. Chapter 35. Julian squared off against Ivar, his shoulders heaving. He drew back his sword, daring the Mordor to charge him again. The Mordor obliged, leaping forward with a grunt. He swung his fist around, and Julian barely jumped back in time so that the blow missed him. Ivar followed the movement up with a solid uppercut to Julian's jaw, which felled the young man. Fiona cringed at the crack of the blow and cried out, "Stop!" Ivar ignored her, raising a giant foot to crush his opponent's skull. Julian didn't move. Fiona ran to his aid. She wished for the wind to come, and it did, swirling to her and snaking around to form a hand as it targeted the enemy. Upon contact, it knocked the man to the ground before forming a protective barrier around Julian. The force shimmered with the effort, and Fiona felt the energy drain from her. She wasn't sure how long she could hold the wind. This was more than she'd tried before. The clanging of weapons caught her attention, and Fiona looked behind her as she strained. Remnants of the Mordor army had descended upon them as Nikolaus and the Puka tried to fend them off. The last of her energy vanished, spent, and she fell to the ground, barely catching herself with her hands. Ivar laughed, picking himself up. "You really think you can win?" She glared at him as she struggled for breath. "I will." "You are mistaken. Look." Fiona followed the direction of his gaze and saw the old Grange doorway, where the stones abandoned their gray hue and took on a green glow. All but the top of the doorway lit up, glowing ominously. The vial shone so brightly it hurt her eyes, and Mulaney's skin took on an orange hue. It was over, she knew. They really had lost. Ivar wiped his bloody knuckles on his coat and turned to return to Elena's side. Fiona laid prone on the snowy ground, angry tears melting the snow around her head. It had all been for nothing. If the Mordor army had returned, that meant the Shades were dead. Darry, Brannon, Dakara, all of them. The sky above wavered, her vision weakening. She'd used what energy reserves the tea had given her. Would she die? Would she return to Ireland where no life waited for her? She closed her eyes in defeat, waiting for the inevitable. A great cry shook the ground. Fiona lifted her head weakly, fighting to focus on the figures in the distance. There were many of them, different shapes and sizes. Her vision cleared just enough to make them out, and her heart rose. All manner of animal and beast stood before them, flanked by more shades. The boom she heard, it must have been Bella's portal. The shades stood with their affinities, creatures that stood or hovered, all waiting for something. In the center stood Dax, Leah, and Natalie. Movement flickered at the edges of the figures. The Leshy stepped into view, surrounded by wood animals. A boar squealed, bloodthirsty. A wild cat licked its lips, running a leathery tongue over sharp fangs. Wickard Forest had come to the unforgiving mountains to defend the land, to defend her. The new army of animals, men and women, roared and jumped into the fight, taking the Mordor army by surprise. The Leshy closed the distance to Fiona so swiftly she didn't catch the motion. It kneeled over her, black eyes unblinking as it rested the wooden hand on her chest and chittered to itself. Fiona felt a surge of power flow through her, a warmth starting in her chest and running to her fingers and toes. The Leshy picked her up and set her on her feet, bowing its head wordlessly. Then, it raised its spear to the sky and bellowed, joining the fight. Fiona glanced at the doorway where the light fully illuminated. Ivar stood with his eyes focused on Mulaney's body. Her arms and legs twitched as a cloud of steam rose from the vial and infiltrated her eyes, nose, and mouth. Alina's life force. It was too late. Fiona made a mad dash for her friend, hoping she could stop it. As she reached the door, Ivar turned and swatted her to the side like a fly. "There's no hope for you here, little lady," he laughed. "The transfer is nearly complete." A rope of fire snapped against the stone frame, sparking and setting Ivar's sleeve on fire. He batted at it and turned in surprise. "There's always hope," Julian said, pulling the flame back like a whip. "Now back off." Ivar shook his head, anger filling his eyes. "You know that's not going to happen." Fiona saw her chance. She brought the wind to her and pushed it against the Mordor with all the strength she could muster. It grabbed him around his legs, and Julian's fire curled around his arms, searing to the bone. Together they lifted him into the air as he fought and cursed and screamed. Then he slammed into the ground and stilled. "Get Mulaney." Julian ran back to the fight. Fiona scooted over to her friend. Mulaney's head jerked and her eyes flew open, wide and pupilless. The vial was nearly empty. Fiona grabbed it and raised it above her head. "No!" A voice echoed through her mind so loudly she flinched. "Sorry, Alina. This isn't your body." Fiona smashed the vial against the stone corner, feeling it crack. The steam continued pouring into Mulaney's body, so she hit it again and again until the glass shattered and rained onto the ground. The steam faded into the wind, and with it, Fiona heard Alina's screams as they, too, dimmed in the mountainous air. Mulaney opened her eyes again, this time looking normal, albeit pale and exhausted. Fiona hurried to her side, pulling her close. Fiona? Mulaney's voice cracked. Is it over? Fiona glanced over at the field beside them. The remaining Mordors were corralled in a circle of forest beasts, their faces panicked. The Shades walked among the fallen, looking for those who could be saved. She smiled to see her friends among those who searched. Yeah, she hugged her friend closer. It's over. Break in the story. Looks like a lot of time has moved on as they are now in a new location. Fiona leaned on the gates to Shades Hollow, watching Cleary stooped, receding figure as he walked away. Think he'll be back? Not if he values his life. Julian twirled a knife in his hand, watching with her. Banishment is forever. Almighty Bookfather, I bow before your butteriness. Ah, Killa, you crack me up. How are you, madam? We're very close to the end of this book. Are you streaming tonight, Killa? Doing well playing Valorant with daughter? Oh, that's cool. Well, tell your daughter I said hello. And tell her to go easy on you, you know? Unless you're paying as a team, then, you know, kick ass. Take names. Or kick names and take ass, you know, whichever you want. I'm not gonna question it. Cleary was nearly out of sight now, disappearing into the falling snow. He'd left with whatever he could pack into one satchel and a donkey to carry him. Stubborn, as always, he'd refused to ride it just yet. It's not like we can't handle him if he shows up, Brannon said from behind them. Let's close the gate. We've got other things to tend to. Fiona squinted into the wall of snowfall, but any trace of Clear's existence was wiped away. She grabbed the iron gate and pulled it closed. The main building was open to let it air out, as the new council member and magistrate, Mulaney, was determined to rid it of Cleary's stench. Fiona stepped inside to see her friend. He's gone. We have a lot of rebuilding to do here. Mulaney stopped scrubbing a wall and wiped the sweat from her brow. This is going to be a new place. A safe one. If anyone can do that, it's you. Mulaney laughed. Thanks. If only I believed it. Fiona, Nicholas called from outside. Come here. Fiona flashed a puzzled look at Mulaney, who smiled knowingly and nodded. Go. Fiona went out to the porch and gasped at the sight before her. Shades gathered all along the side of the building, affinities out and resting beside them. They'd split down the middle so that a path formed, and Fiona's gaze landed on the large figure standing there. The Leshy. Boldly it stood, watching her with its blank, wide eyes. Somehow she sensed emotion from it. Gratitude? Love? She couldn't be sure, but it was nothing to fear. She moved down the steps, closing the gap between them until she was close enough to feel its hot breath on her face. It's you, she breathed, reaching out to rest her palm on its chest. It shifted at the gesture, making a sound like the groan of a tree in the wind. It was purring, she realized. Thank you for your help, she whispered. The Leshy slowly knelt to one knee, slow and awkward with the movement, but purposeful in response. It thrust its spear toward and bowed its head. Tears welled in Fiona's eyes, unsure how to accept such an act. So she did the only thing she could think to do at that moment. She flung herself forward, wrapping her arms around its thick neck and hugging tightly. It stiffened at first, but she didn't notice. Tears flowed unbidingly, and everything she'd held inside with the loss of her family and friends burst forward. "It's going to be okay," Milanie said from behind her. "We're your family, Fiona. So is it." She tipped her head at the Leshy. Fiona smiled through her tears as she pulled away from the Leshy. "Yes." The shades began to chant, softly at first, and then stronger, louder until it became a deafening cry. To the sky, to the earth, to the air, to the shades. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, the Shades of Orthea. Well, what a neat little ending. I think we can determine by that ending that this is her home now. She is not supposed to go back. And at the same time, I think we kind of knew that all along because she really had nothing else to go back to. Her family had been killed. Her fiancé murdered as well. And suddenly she finds herself in this new place. Even her cousin, I think it was. We never really knew what happened to her either. I'm assuming death, but kind of hard to say. But either way, a nice little ending. Not a big bow, but a neat little one. I liked it. I really did. I was hoping to have our author come join us to have a little chat about her book and her writing, but she is definitely actively playing her violin right now to something, probably something really cool. But I'll give her a shout out so that you can at least go say hello if you want to, and let her know that you've heard her book, one of them. So feel free to click on that link and say hello. But in the meantime, as we put that book aside, we can now focus on what we're going to read next. So this is a book I wrote, gosh, when did I first publish this? Does it even say? Probably not. Nope, it doesn't. But either way, I'm going to read to you the back cover so that you know what you're getting into when we come back on Thursday. In a dystopian world where time and resources are running out, Barry and his friends fight to survive. As Barry learns the truth of who he is and the legacy left for him, he must tackle the fight head on and lead the world he knows to safety. So on the front, we have a picture of a big chrome tower. And then on the back, you have an image of a building that's burning at the entrance. Both of those images are important for the type of story that you're going to get into with this book. There's only one thing about this book that I regret. In all of my other books, I made the chapters nice and short, nice bite-sized chapters. So that way, if you're taking a short journey, you can read a chapter and not feel like you have to stop halfway through. Did you read this to the end? To read what, Mitchell? Sorry. You talking about the Shades of Orthea? But with this book, I didn't do that. There's only like 8 chapters in this story, I think. If I remember correctly. And so the chapters are really long. And I did that on purpose, but part of me wishes maybe I hadn't done it that way. Joking about your novel. So yeah, it's just a different style for me in my writing. So it'll be interesting. But either way, I love the story. I had fun writing this one, and we'll start it on Thursday. So that'll be exciting. And look at that. We ended pretty much right on time. So that's cool. Now we just need to figure out who we're going to go say hi to. There's a lot of people on right now. There's a ton of people on right now.
If you're looking for an Airbnb you'll love, just look for an Airbnb other guests.
And there's an ad with our music. Let's see. We've got my 3 Canadian brothers playing a game. They are the After Hours Broalition. Really nice guys. And they're all playing together at the same time, which is kind of new. That's very intriguing. Iron is on playing DBD. Of course, that violin chick is on playing music. Thanks for the stream. I couldn't fall asleep because latte. Yeah, you think? I'll be heading over there to the bros. Yeah, I was thinking about rating them. No, I would have normally rated that violin chick, but we rated her a lot. And I'll still pop into her stream to let her know that we were done. But anyway, you have a good... Whoa, hello, steady microphone. You have a good night too, Mama House Gaming. Thank you so much for being here. Folks, if you don't know who Mama House Gaming is, you should. She's a delightful human being. We also have some other folks in chat that stream, like Eternal Grey. Eternal Grey. And of course, we have the wonderful Killa, currently playing a game with her daughter. All right, but yes, we are going to go raid the After Hours Broalition. Really great group of guys. Friday night, I'm actually going to be playing with one of them, Super. Not on stream, just in Discord, playing Helldivers together. So that's going to be fun. Okay. After Hours Broalition. And when it comes to my book, that we're going to start on Thursday, I will not be promoting it as far as a link and all that stuff. I want to promote other authors. We're just taking a break to read my book because I want to give time between other people's books. But I won't be promoting a link to say, hey, go get a copy. Because that's not how I roll with my own stuff. So I will, however, figure out some sort of giveaway so that by the time we're done with the book, I can sign it and then mail it to whoever wins. if you wish to win a copy. Or not just a copy, but the copy. So that'll be a thing. But until then, please, please, please take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And have a wonderful night.